Now, when we talk about laws, especially for handguns, it's important to remember that laws change. They change on a somewhat frequent basis, and again, especially with firearms, this is something that tends to change as lawmakers decide that different things need to be enacted. So, in order to get through this section of the training, you're going to need to read through the attached download that talks more specifically about current laws. But we're going to go over some basics when it comes to firearms and self-defense using deadly force. What is deadly force? Well, deadly force is, for all intents and purposes, and somewhat it's worded in similar ways throughout different states and jurisdictions, is that it means the intentional application of something that is reasonably likely to cause death or serious physical injury. And now, serious physical injury typically through court rulings has come to mean something that's going to require like an overnight stay or longer in a hospital, not just something you go into the ER and you check out with. It's going to require staying in a hospital. So, deadly force is something that is reasonably likely to cause that or death to somebody else. So when can you use deadly force? Well, you can use typically deadly force in one of two situations. You can either use it to stop an imminent, reasonable threat of death or serious bodily harm to yourself, or an imminent, reasonable threat of death or serious bodily harm to somebody in your immediate vicinity. Now, some people have said, well, that's okay. If I need to use my gun, I'll just say that I felt threatened. I felt an imminent threat. Remember, we said it has to be a reasonable imminent threat. And who determines reasonable? Well, unfortunately, you aren't the be-all, end-all when it comes to determining reasonable. You get to make the split-second decision to determine what's reasonable, but you better have something that can explain and justify why you thought it was reasonable. Because what ultimately determines whether it was reasonable or not is a jury of 12 of your peers that are listening to you explain the facts, who can reasonably go, yeah, I think if I was him, under his circumstances and in that situation, I would have felt a reasonable imminent threat of death or serious bodily harm myself. So that's what we mean by reasonable. It has to be something that others believe is reasonable, not just what you say you think is reasonable. So what about defending your property? Well, some people say, hey, if I see somebody out breaking into my car, grabbing my gun, I'm going to go out and see what's going on with that. Bad idea. Typically, it's illegal to defend property with deadly force. And remember, anytime you bring a firearm into play, that's deadly force. You don't have to press the trigger to apply deadly force. Simply pointing a firearm at somebody, in the eyes of the law, typically is using deadly force. So if you point your firearm at somebody, you better have a really good reason to do it. Something that seems reasonable to others, that you seem like you are reasonably in fear of death or serious physical injury. So what about the situation where you're in some sort of an altercation with somebody, a verbal altercation, and it starts to escalate, and they punch you in the nose? Is that time to pull out your gun? Nope. That is not time to pull out the gun, because getting punched in the nose, well, it sucks, and it hurts. I can tell you from experience, it hurts. It doesn't give you the right to pull out your firearm because you haven't reached a deadly force threshold yet. So the firearm needs to stay holstered unless there's something more that you can explain. Maybe you got punched and fell on your back and the person has now jumped on top of you and is attempting to punch you more in the face or smash your head into the concrete. Those types of things, because now that's escalated into something that can cause serious bodily harm. So again, everything comes back to what is reasonable to believe. And so we like to think of the term CYA. What does CYA stand for? Everybody's heard CYA, right? I know you're already saying in your mind, you know what it stands for. Can you articulate? I know that's not what you were thinking in your mind, most likely. But can you articulate is the key. Because whenever you go to court to explain your use of deadly force, and believe me, if you use deadly force, you're going to be in court because you're going to have to justify it. So whenever you go to explain it, you need to think, can you articulate why you reasonably felt imminent threat of death or serious bodily harm? And it doesn't have to be any one reason. It's the totality of the circumstances that are going on. It could be the person was significantly bigger than you. The person had something that possibly appeared to be a weapon in their hands. Maybe you saw the glinting of something shiny. You weren't sure if it was a cell phone or a knife. It looked like it was a knife. Maybe it was dark and you couldn't see what was going on. Maybe there were multiple attackers. Maybe you wound up on your back. One thing after another. It's being able to explain all of these. Can you articulate the totality of the circumstances as to why you felt the need to use deadly force? Now, we talked about how you want to make sure that you can articulate why you felt you were reasonably in fear of your life. But what we don't want you to do is get wrapped around the axle on it and have to stop and think in the heat of the moment, wait, let's see, can I explain why I felt like I was reasonably in fear of death or serious bodily harm? Bang! You get shot trying to think it out, right? That's not what we're saying you should do. What we're trying to explain is, if you genuinely feel like you are reasonably in serious, imminent threat of death or serious bodily harm, take action. Use deadly force if you need to. That's okay to do. You will be able to, after the fact, figure out why you felt your life was in threat or threatened, but you don't need to sit and think it out ahead of time. If you genuinely feel it, you'll be able to articulate it afterwards. What we caution against is don't stop and pause and go, could I justify shooting this person right now? Because if you're trying to come up with a way to justify it, that's probably going to be a bad use of deadly force. That's probably going to come back to bite you and get you in trouble. If not criminally, at least civilly. So, make sure that if you're thinking, I don't know, don't do it. If you're thinking, I feel like I'm in danger right now, I'm in serious threat of death or serious bodily harm, take action, go for it, figure it out later. Now let's talk about a common situation that people think of using a handgun in self-defense for. We're going to use this one because it's so commonly talked about, but oftentimes not thought through really well. And this isn't the be-all, end-all. There's multiple scenarios, multiple applications, but we're going to give you one big scenario, talk about the legalities and tactical advantages and disadvantages that you should be thinking about ahead of time. So what we're going to talk about right now is one of the most common ones that people get a firearm for is defending your home. Somebody breaks into your house. You hear a bump in the middle of the night, sounds like somebody came into your house. What do? Hey, let's be real. Our natural instinct is what? Get that gun, honey, sit tight, I'm going to find out what the noise is. You go downstairs and you search your house. And why do you do it? Because, hey, you know your house better than anybody, right? You can close your eyes and know how many steps it takes to get from one piece of furniture to the other, know how many steps it takes to get across the room. You know that house. You know it like the back of your hand. You got the tactical advantage, right? Wrong. Because how do you know which piece of furniture that intruder is crouched down hiding behind? How do you know which doorway that intruder is waiting around the corner for you on? When will you know? When you walk by and they grab you, right? That's when you know. That's too late. You just gave away your entire tactical advantage. So tactically, for that reason, it doesn't make a lot of sense to go searching your home. And hey, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that you're wrong if you do that, because it's our natural instinct. All we're talking about here is what makes sense legally and tactically. Now let's talk about another problem that comes up tactically with going down and searching for somebody in your home. Let's say you go down and you're searching around and all of a sudden you see that dark figure go bolting across the room. Oh boy, got him now, right? So you start shooting How easy is it to hit a moving target? Have you ever really tried to hit a moving target? It's not easy. It's a very tough thing to accomplish. So tactically, you've just created a huge disadvantage for yourself. And what about this? Let's say you chase that dark figure across the room, bang, 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 boom, got him. Walk up, only to discover it was your teenager sneaking into the house in the middle of the night, and you couldn't tell in the dark. That's a life changer, right? So, a lot of different things to think about with tactics when it comes to going down and searching for somebody in your home. Now let's talk about the legalities of it. Let's say you go down there, and again, let's say you shoot, bang, 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 and you hit the person, and you get them. And whether they get seriously injured or they die, whatever the case may be, and they're the bad guy, all right, you're feeling pretty good about it, right? Until you get to court, and you get asked, what made you feel reasonably in imminent threat of death or serious bodily harm? And you're going to say, well, he's in my house. Okay, but what was he doing in your house? You're going to say, I don't care, he's in my house. Well, remember, that's not always a good defense. And even if it's a good defense criminally, it probably won't stand up civilly. Because guaranteed, you know what that bad guy's attorney is going to argue? My client was running for the door. He was trying to get out. You gunned him down in cold blood. I'm not saying that the system is right, just saying these are things that you need to think about that you probably haven't taken the time to consider before now. So what could you do if you heard that loud noise in the night and you're laying in bed? Well, how about this? How about you pick up your phone, 911, even if you set the phone right back down on the dresser. Why do we say that? Well, obviously, if you got a landline, they're going to be able to track right where you're at, come to your house, see what's going on. If you got a cell phone, it's a little trickier. They can kind of triangulate within a good 300 yards or whatever of where you're at roughly and probably find the commotion and figure out where you're at. But it's not even so much about getting help there. Help will be on the way and they'll be on standby when something goes down. But why do we say to dial 911 even if you just leave the phone there? Because what happens with every 911 phone call? That's right, it gets recorded. Yeah. And what happens in every court case where there's a 911 call associated with it? Oh yeah, that recording gets played in court. So what can we do to take huge advantage of this and make this work to our favor? Well, how about this? How about 911, you set the phone down, you get your firearm, you point out and you say, get out of the house, I got a gun. What kind of person is going to stick around your house to steal your TV or do something like that if they hear, get out of the house, I got a gun? They're getting the heck out, right? Holy moly, nothing in here is worth my life. I'm out of here. But if you say, get out of the house, I got a gun, and they keep coming to you, there's a problem. They're not there for your stuff. What are they there for? That's right, they're there for you or your loved ones. So, if you say, get out of the house, I got a gun, get out of the house, I got a gun, and they keep on coming, and you end up shooting, bang, dang, that's an easy day in court, right? Because you simply play the 911 recording back. I told him over and over, get out of the house, I had a gun. He kept on coming. I was scared out of my mind because it was clear he was there to harm me. And who in the jury box is going to disagree with that reasoning? It's on a 911 call. It's all right there, neatly packaged. So legally, you give yourself a huge advantage. But tactically, you give yourself an even bigger advantage potentially. Why do we say that? Well, how many entrances and egresses do you typically have from your bedroom in your home, at least to the interior of your house? Typically one, right? One nice man-sized doorway. In law enforcement, we call this the fatal funnel. We call it the fatal funnel because it forces you, if you want to get into a room, to go through an area where gunfire can easily be directed to gun down anything coming through that doorway. So let's think about this. You no longer have to chase a moving target. You simply point at your doorway and say, get out of the house, I got a gun. If they walk to your doorway, they pretty much fill up the middle of the doorway, right? So if you're just kind of aiming somewhere in the general vicinity of the middle of the doorway, you got yourself covered. It's a pretty easy shot from there, or multiple shots, whatever the case may be. So tactically, you've got a huge advantage to go with your legal advantage by sitting and letting them come to you. And one final thing that is important about this. We said earlier, bullets, do they travel into things or through them? Oh yeah, they typically are going through, right? So if you're chasing somebody down your house, bang, 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 shooting, and rounds are hitting the wall and they're going through, are they stopping in your wall? Not likely, depending on your construction. It's probably going through your wall, into your neighbor's house, maybe through a couple walls in their house, depending on the round you're using and all that good stuff. So you got a lot of things to worry about in the aftermath, right? But if you already know that you've got this doorway to aim at, guess what you get to do? Predetermine your backdrop. You might look at it and go, let's see, if I go down the doorway here, that goes straight down the hall to my bathroom. I don't know that I want to be shooting in my bathroom. Oh, but you know, over here on this side of the hall, I've got that nice solid oak bookcase. Hey, if I sleep on this side of the bed and I ever had to point at my doorway, I'm pointing right at my bookcase. So if I hit bad guy and a round goes through him, guess what it's going to stop in? Yeah, it's going to stop in your solid oak bookcase, isn't it? You get to predetermine the backstop for your bullets. How beautiful is that? Doesn't get much easier, does it? So we're not saying that this is the be-all, end-all, that this answers every question, or this is always the way it needs to be done, because there's always factors to consider. Obviously, if you've got little ones in your house, you've got to consider where they're at, what's going on there. These are just some things to think about legally and tactically when it comes to using deadly force to defend yourself and your loved ones. So what we encourage you to do is to come up with additional scenarios similar to this. Think them through a little bit. Give them a little bit of thought based on what you know about the laws, based on what you know about tactics, and think about what would make sense in those situations so that before you're ever in a situation like that, you already kind of have an idea of what to do so you don't have to think about it in the heat of the moment.